Now, speaking of the Likud pledge to support Netanyahu, it seems that too has now become cannon fodder for Netanyahu's opponents, as a new campaign ad released by the Blue and White Party suggests that in return for loyalty, right-wing parties will demand money for their own agendas. But in response, right-wing party leaders like Shas's Aryeh Deri are calling the ad anti-Semitic pure and simple. Well, here with us now with more via Skype, we're joined by former Knesset member Rabbi Lipman. Rabbi?
Hi, good to see you.
Hi, it's good to see you, Dov. So, what did you think of the ad?
I'll be honest with you, and I want to be clear. I left the Yesh Atid party, which is now Blue and White, over a year ago. I have no obligation to defend anybody there. I didn't see it as anti-Semitic. I think that's all part of the election rhetoric. Anytime anybody references money, it doesn't mean that it's anti-Semitic. I do think it crosses a line, and there's no reason to say that someone wants all the money of Israel. And I don't actually think it helps Blue and White at all to have these kinds of ads that's not raising them in the polls. But I would disagree with the characterization of it being anti-Semitic.
So where do you think that allegation comes from? Just purely from the money standpoint?
There's a long history between the ultra-Orthodox parties and Yair Lapid. And by the way, the ultra-Orthodox have a long history of pretty nasty name-calling back, calling Lapid the worst enemy in the Jewish people's history and other names. I think that there's a lot of heightened animosity between these two groups, so they'll immediately jump to exaggerated terminologies about one to the other. But again, I want to emphasize Blue and White Party, which is trying to portray itself as a leadership party, a uniting party, doesn't do itself a favor when it comes out with attack ads like this. And by the way, it's not me saying this. Lapid's cohorts in Blue and White came out against the advertisement, so they clearly have some work to do within their own camp to make sure that they have their messaging correctly.
So that kind of brings me to the next question. You have ads like this and ones that are coming up from Avigdor Lieberman and really from both sides. But with this ad specifically, do you think that this will drive people away from the party or have no effect because people are just saying, oh, that's politics? Or how do you think that this will affect the public?
At this point, I think it can only hurt them. Avigdor Lieberman has really taken the votes of those who are anti the ultra-Orthodox camp, and he's done it, by the way, I think for the most part, in a pretty nice way in terms of he says yes to a Jewish state, no to a theocratic state. He's done it in a pretty good way without crossing the lines. Here and there he might have. He's taken those voters already that catapulted him from 5 seats to 10 seats. Blue and White, I don't see them growing through this, and all it could do is some of those who are comfortable with Benny Gantz, comfortable with Moshe Ya'alon, who have not been in this camp of attacking the Haredim. They've actually gone and visited yeshivot. They've gone on ultra-Orthodox radio. They're visiting with the rabbis. They might be hesitant to vote for Blue and White if they see it as being too anti-religious or anti-Haredi. So I would caution Lapid and his people that I don't see it growing at all, and it actually could very much hurt them.
All right, well then... And then going back a second to what you said about Lieberman, you said, he's doing a very good job kind of balancing his Jewish but not theocratic ideology. But a lot of people are saying that, he's just a populist. Would you agree with that?
He took a pretty strong stand after the April elections that didn't join the government. And whether he had other reasons for it or not, the public definitely sees it as he's someone who stood up to the ultra-Orthodox parties. And he's focusing much more on religion and state issues, very, very practical issues, which does speak to a large percentage of the Israeli population. So there's no doubt that he's done a masterful job in putting himself in the center and the focus of these elections, that's for sure. And there are actual issues on the table. I really believe he has cornered that market, and there is no other space for Lapid to try to build off that. Lapid is trying to compete with him for those votes, and I just think it's too late for him to do that, and it might be worthwhile to focus on other issues which Lieberman has not really tackled.
Okay, and then I guess for my final question, let's move back to Netanyahu, and kind of what started this attack ad was, Netanyahu's, or rather David Bitan from the Likud, his pledge that went out for the Likud, forcing everybody to kind of pledge their allegiance to Netanyahu in the upcoming elections, regardless of the outcome. How do you think that affected the Likud, and whether or not that came off as weak or was necessary, or how do you react?
I have to be honest with you. I think the Likud's answer to the attacks against them were brilliant, as they highlighted, we have a leader who was democratically elected. We have members of the list who are democratically elected. Look at these parties that are attacking us, where it's not that way, where people just founded their own parties and create their own lists and throw people out at their whim and bring people in at their whim. I think it was a brilliant answer, which highlighted where the Likud stands. I haven't heard too much in terms of them taking a hit, certainly not from their base. You have to remember, the goal is, can anybody move people away from their support for Likud to somewhere else? And I don't think it's doing it at all. I do think this whole episode played again into Lieberman. He became the center of attention by Likud responding this way to his suggestion that he was maybe going to work with someone else in Likud. And he's doing a masterful job politically in terms of that. To be honest with you, Aaron, I don't see anyone shifting any blocks anywhere at the moment. Everyone's trying. The polls seem to be very steady, which shows that we're heading towards a stalemate after we come to the September elections. Wow. And it's going to take someone from one side or the other to jump ship to the other side to break that stalemate.
All right, well, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. Rabbi Dov Lipman, it is always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.